Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and what I want to talk about today is some fundamental ideas in Express. Or actually, this is our fundamental ideas to any web framework. The idea of how we break down sort of URL patterns. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a new Express project. So I'm going to create a new folder. Okay, we'll just call this Params Queries Oh My. Okay, I'm going to open this up in the terminal. We'll just start a new npm project, npm init-y. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to install Express, npm install Express, and that's all I need for just talking about Express. Okay, so I'm going to create a server.js in this file. So first we're going to import Express, so const express equals require Express, and then we're going to create an application object, const app equals Express, and then we're going to create our server listener, app.listen, listening on port 3000, and we're going to say do a little callback function that just basically console.logs listening on port 3000. Okay, and basically what you're doing with Express is you're just defining a server. You're creating a server. So right now, all my application does is start a server listener on port 3000 that's listening for requests. Right now, I've defined no kind of response to those requests. So right now, I could type in, I'll just run this node server.js. And it's giving me an error because it looks like I got something running on that port. Do I? No. Well, let's just kill that port. Okay, so let me go get my command for port killing. I got it somewhere around here. It's got so many notes. It's right over here. Here we go. Perfect. So if you ever get this error, it just means something else is already using up that port. And see, I'm trying to use port 3000. So I'm going to paste this in there. I'll give you a second to take a look at it. It's a command that you should always kind of have handy. Okay, so that port's going to be freed up. And now I can do node server.js. And see, I have a server now running on port 3000. And notice that the terminal is locked up. That is because an instance of the terminal is only one process. So technically I have one process that has not ended. That's the server running. The server's just going to keep running until I tell it to stop. So that means I can't do anything else in this terminal. Now let me go get a browser window so we can go visit that. And again, since I'm running the server on my computer is either going to be called localhost, or I can call it by its IP address 0.1.0.0.1. That's just the IP address, but it's much easier to say localhost, which is why localhost exists, because it's much easier than typing 127.0.0.1. But if I go there and I get this, because this just means, hey, my server has no way to handle this particular request. It has no way of knowing how to handle a get request to slash. It just doesn't know. That's the whole point of Express. We're defining how to respond to certain requests. Okay, so if I do app.get, I'm saying, hey, I want to define how to respond to a particular get request. So now if I say /cheese, I'm saying a request to the endpoint of /cheese, and then I have to pass in a function, res. Okay, and then these two things that get passed into that function are called the request object, which has a bunch of data inside of it that I can use. Okay, and then there's res, which is the response object, which is really just an object with functions. So what I'm going to do is I want to res.json, which means I'm going to send back a response in the form of JSON. And I'm actually just going to send the whole request object. I think this will actually error, but let me try it out. So let me restart the server. And let's go back over here. I'm going to go to /cheese, because that's what the route I just defined. So see, The endpoint is anything after this first part of the URL, anything after the 3000, because this is what's referred to as the host part of the URL. So this is the host, this is the endpoint. So what I'm defining is how to respond to the endpoint. Okay, type error converting circular structure JSON. Yeah, you can't generate the whole object. Let me think if there's a way. No, but let's do a few things. Let's create a new object just to show that these things exist within the request object. We're going to say const, because there's a whole bunch of different things inside of it. So I'm going to destructure a few of them. So I want to grab the query, which the query property, the method. I think there's a host property, and I think headers. Okay, these are all things that are coming from the request. So these are the request headers, the host of the request, meaning where is that request coming from? I think it's host. Method, meaning is it like get post as the request. Queries, if there's any URL queries. So I'm going to pass those things as an object. Query, method, host. I just realized I didn't finish what I was doing up here. So again, I'm destructuring these from the request object. So I'm saying, hey, pull these things out of request. And that's pretty awesome. VS Code is telling me that no, there is no host in there. Don't ask for that. So I think URL is what I'm looking for. Yeah, right there. See, that's a cool thing about VS Code. It knows what's going on in there, so it'll tell me like what's in there. Okay, so I'm gonna replace this with URL. So I'm pulling these things out of the request object, and I am going to put them in this object. And again, if you want to know all the things that are inside the request object, check out the Express documentation. Okay, now I see here a little curly bracket with a red squiggle there, so let me just see why that's showing up there. Well, that's because this res.json is enclosed. Okay, which tells me that this function here is enclosed. So that's going to cause an error, because I need a, yep, there we go, now we're good. Because I need this curly bracket to finish this, and then I need to make sure that this is all one thing. Okay, so let's restart the server. Nope, I'm still making a mistake somewhere. Oh, because I don't have a parenthesis to match that. There we go. Okay, I gotta make sure I match everything. So that, because technically this is a function. This is the arguments being passed to that. These are the arguments I'm passing to that function. Argument 1 and argument 2, this function. Okay, actually that goes all the way up to here. Okay, so let's see here. Let me actually go back here, turn on the server, node server.js, and see, like the method. See, I can get this information from the request object, like the method. The method is get. The URL is /cheese. Okay, and the headers. Not that you probably won't care too much about the headers, request headers, unless you're doing authentication and authorization with JWT tokens. Otherwise, probably not. But you can see that that information is available to you. The request object has all sorts of cool stuff. And right now you don't see a query object. Well, you see a query, but it's empty. Now again, a URL query is always added to the end of the URL. So I can just add a URL query, always starts with a question mark, and I can be like cheese equals Gouda. And see if I hit enter, cheese equals Gouda. I can add additional queries. So I hit ampersand, and I can be like bread equals rye. And that gets added to the query object. And I can be like beep equals boop, and that gets added to the query object. The cool thing about the query is that you don't have to define what's coming in as a query ahead of time. Okay, the query is just anything you add with this question mark syntax. So and that all gets added inside this query object that's inside the request, so rec.query. Okay, but sometimes there's parts of the URL you want to kind of mark as something you can grab. Okay, so let's make another route. Okay, let me just save this so that way it kind of cleans it up a little bit. There you go. Let's make another route. We'll call this app dot get. Now it's not just slash cheese, it's slash cheese slash bread. But notice I put a colon in front of that bread. So what that means is that the URL isn't slash cheese slash bread. It's just anything that's in that second part of the URL is a variable. This is referred to as a URL param. Okay, rec res. Okay. And what I want to do here is we're going to, once again, destruction some stuff. So I'm going to just grab const. I just really just want params. That's where all the URL params get stored. And I want the query. That's all I really care about right now. And I'm grabbing that from rec. Okay, so I'm going to just grab that from the request object. And then we're just going to res.json again. In res.json, it's just going to be an object with params and query. Okay, that's it. Okay, just so you can see that these params exist. So I'll restart the server. Because you got to restart the server. The program's got to get read back into memory so it captures all the updates. But now if I go to slash cheese slash 78, see the query, the param, see it's not slash cheese slash bread, it's slash cheese, and whatever's after the slash is stored under bread in params. And if I make it 99, it's just 99. And if I had a query at the end of that URL, cheese equals Gouda and bread equals rye, see that part gets stored in the query object. Okay, cool. Cool, so that's kind of how you define the path. So I'm basically what you're doing when you're defining this is you're defining what is it that you're matching. I'm just saying this function here will run whenever a request comes in where the method equals get and the URL matches this. Except when it sees this colon, it knows that this doesn't have to actually match exactly this. It just has to have an extra part of the URL. It just knows that anything that's in this part of the URL, anything flies and will be stored in a variable called bread. Okay. Now let's just talk a quick second about response. So res.json sends the data back as JSON. There's also res.send that sends back text. So I can do send that just sends a string of text. Cheese. Okay. So if I do that, Control C, I'm going to go back to just slash cheese. And so this time I'm just doing slash cheese, and slash cheese is different than slash cheese slash something else. So it doesn't hit that second route, it hits the first route. Okay, and see it's like slash, I just get a string back called cheese. Well, what if I want to send them to another page? Like I want to do something, and then when I'm done doing the thing, I just want to send them somewhere else. I could do res.redirect. This sends them to another URL. It could be any URL. I could actually go send them to google.com. So I can be like https://www.google.com. So basically what this will do is that when you try to go to slash cheese, it's just going to send you over to google.com. So now if I hit this enter now, and see it sent me over to google.com. Okay, that's what res.redirect does. But I really want to send it to this route here. Now here's the problem. If I send it to slash cheese slash colon bread, it's literally going to send it to that URL. And this is what's referred to as a relative URL. Since I'm not typing the http blah blah blah.com, it assumes I'm staying on the same website and just adds this to the current host. So it'll just slap this at the end of localhost 3000. So I do this, and I go over here, and I go to slash cheese again. Now watch what's going to happen in here through the URL. See, now it actually thinks that what I wanted to put is the param is slash bread. Because at this point it's not a route. Now I'm actually saying, hey, that's what's in the URL. So it thinks that's the variable, colon bread. That's maybe not what I meant. Really what I meant is maybe like I wanted to send them to cheese slash rye. Okay, and now if I restart my server, and I, go back to the cheese route, it's going to redirect them, and I'll watch how it redirects. See, it sends it to literally localhost 3000/cheese/rye, and see that because of the way I define my route with the colon bread, it knows that that part with the rye is in the variable called bread. Okay, so takeaways. Anything that's part of the URL as a query gets stored in the request.query object. Anything you define as a param, meaning when you define the route, so when you do app.get, app.post, app.whatever, you're always defining a route. You're defining a pattern. It's pattern matching. This means a variable part of the pattern. That's what a colon means. It means this could be anything. It doesn't literally have to be the word bread. It could be rye. It could be white. It could be oat. It could be cornbread. Whatever. Whatever this part of the URL is will be stored inside the request.params object under that key. So it'll be rec.params.bread. Okay? So that's what I'm doing when I define the route. And then I can respond in different ways. I can use res, meaning response, and I can redirect someone to another page. I could send a text string with res.send. I could send back JSON data with res.json. Or I could actually render like a template and do res.render, which would render a template with whatever templating engine you decide to use. There are dozens of them out there, EJS being one of the most popular, but there's also Handlebars, Nunjucks, Liquid, Mustache. I think I said Handlebar has a mustache already. Pug, Express React Views, and there's a whole bunch more. But those are sort of the big ones. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Hopefully this clarifies how URL params. And again, this same process works in every other web framework. Every other web framework is going to have a way for you to define URL params. Like in Django, it's more like that. Actually, that's more like Go. In Python, I think they do it like this. Use angle brackets. But generally, they're all going to like do the same thing. The idea is that you'll have some sort of syntactical way to say this part of the URL is a variable and this is the name of the variable, bread. Okay, so that's what it's called, a URL parameter. All mature web frameworks have an ability to use URL params. And then again, queries are anything that uses that question mark syntax at the end of a URL. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.